Welcome to Speaking of Sports. I'm your host, Jared Slack. This week I'm going to review some Week 3 NFL games, and I'm also going to preview some Week 4 NFL games. And as always, I'm going to finish with the perfect fantasy football lineup. It's a great week. It's going to be full of a lot of stuff. Let's start with two exciting, explosive offenses between the Chiefs and the Ravens. So far, the two best quarterbacks between Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Kansas City got an unusually slow start in this game and fell behind 6-0 in the start to this game. But in the second half, they found their identity and led in the first half 23-6. The second half wasn't much better for the Ravens, but they did make it a good game. The final score ended up being 33-28 Chiefs. The Chiefs' rushers ended with 140 yards. The leading rushers were Darren Williams with 62 yards and LaShawn McCoy with 54 yards, both averaging a little over 6.8 yards per carry. And that's what happens whenever you have a great passing game and it opens up that run game. And defenses are more susceptible to the run. And Patrick Mahomes is just having such a great season so far. Patrick Mahomes had about 73% of his passes for 374 yards and 3 touchdowns. That puts Mahomes tied with Kurt Warner for 13 consecutive starts for over 300 yards. If this guy continues what he's doing, being Mahomes, he's gonna break so much records. He's going to definitely be the MVP for this year. I can't wait to see what he's gonna do this year. Okay, now I'm gonna go over to the Dolphins and Cowboys game. In this game, the Dolphins really showed up, especially on defense in their secondary, really giving Dak a hard time in this game. In the second half, not so much, but the Cowboys were 10-6 at half, but that was it for the Dolphins offense. They stayed at 6. That was it. The defense really shut them down in the second half, which is really good to hear. Dak had a very good second half. He has yet to have an incomplete pass in the third quarter, which sounds crazy. He's having a great year so far. He's up there in the top 6 of quarterbacks so far in 2019. Dak had 246 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns. Zeke had 125 yards on the ground. And Tony Pollard had 103 yards and 1 touchdown. The last time two Cowboys had a 100-yard rushing game, Jason Garrett was the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. That was over 24 years ago. That sounds crazy. Now on to some NFL headlines. Melvin Gordon has ended his holdout. This has been a long, drawn-out thing, and I don't think it's going to end as well for Melvin Gordon as it did for Ezekiel Elliott, because Melvin Gordon has a great backup behind him and in Austin Eckler, and so far he has had a great year so far. And it seems to be that Melvin Gordon might have shot himself in the foot on this one, because I think he ruined himself out of a contract, really, honestly. He was offered a deal for, I think it was around $10 million a year. He denied it, and now it doesn't seem like he's going to be getting a deal at all. I do believe that they're going to stick with Austin Eckler and maybe trade Melvin Gordon at the deadline for a piece that they need, and or cut him next year, because why would you need to pay a quarterback like that whenever you have a backup in Austin Eckler that can get the job done? Okay, now I'm going to preview some Week 4 games. I'm going to go over the Cowboys and Saints game. The Cowboys are a 3-point favorite in this game. I don't know if you know what that means, but if you don't, it pretty much means that the Cowboys and Saints were playing in Arlington. This would be a 7-point favorite for the Cowboys, because in New Orleans is a very hard place to play. Those fans are crazy. It's kind of like playing in Seattle or Kansas City. But this will be the first real matchup for the Cowboys. They played some easy teams going through these first 3 weeks, and we'll just have to see how this works out for them. But the Saints will be without veteran quarterback Drew Brees, but it will still be a very tough matchup. They have Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas will be on, or Byron Jones will be on wide receiver Michael Thomas. And last year, Jordan Lewis was lined up against Alvin Kamara and really kind of shut down Alvin Kamara. And I'm looking for that same kind of matchup this year. And I think it's going to be a good matchup defensively for the Cowboys. And offensively, it's for the Cowboys. It's a little bit tougher defense to go against, but I really do believe that this offense and the way that Kellen Moore has this set up, I think it's going to be a great matchup. If Dallas gets more sacks, puts pressure on the quarterback and Teddy Bridgewater, and gets some tackles for loss, I think the Saints are going to have to resort to the run, and the Cowboys are up there with the best in football in the run defense. And if all that happens, I think the Cowboys are going to win this game 30-17. Okay, now on to some Thursday Night Football. This was a great game between the Eagles and Green Bay. Of course, I was going for Green Bay. In the end of the game, Green Bay had a chance to win it. They were in the last drive of the game. Aaron Rodgers walked them all the way down that field to inside the 5-yard line. Early in the game, they lost their rusher. But they didn't really have any yards from the ground. Aaron Rodgers was their leading rusher for 46 yards. And Aaron Rodgers also had to go through the air for 422 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick, and that 1 pick cost him. He lost the game in the end zone on the game-winning drive. This was such a crazy game. The Eagles ended up winning the game 34-27. This puts the Eagles at 2-2. And so far, the Cowboys are 3-0. Eagles 2-2. Giants 1-2, and the Redskins are 0-3. So this kind of helps the Eagles' chances out a little bit. They're not far behind the Cowboys, just 2 games behind the Cowboys. So or a game and a half behind the Cowboys. So the Cowboys' window is just a little bit smaller. So they're going to have to step it up this week against the Saints and get a W in New Orleans. Okay, now I'm going to go over the Week 3 Fantasy Football Perfect Lineup. This was a crazy week full with a lot of great stuff here. You got, as a quarterback, you got Russell Wilson. He passed for 406 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, and 51 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He scored a total of 41.34 points. He had such a great game. Ultimately, they ended up losing the game, but Russell Wilson is doing a really good job this year. In your running backs, you have Alvin Kamara. He ran for 69 yards and 1 touchdown. He received 9 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown. His total ended up being 37.1 points. He really put the team on his back on that win. It was a great game. Mark Ingram is your second running back with 103 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, 4 receptions on 32 yards. He ended the game with 35.5 points. Okay, now on to the receivers. Got Mike Evans for Tampa Bay. He had 8 receptions for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. He ended the game with 45 points. You got Keenan Allen for the Chargers, 13 receptions, 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. He ended the game with 43.6 points. And Cooper Kupp for the Rams. He had 11 receptions, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 33.1 points. Okay, now onto the tight ends. You had Darren Walker for the Rams. He had 13 receptions as a tight end. 13 receptions, that's crazy. I think Derek Carr is really relying on that tight end a lot. 13 receptions for 134 yards and 27.1 points. Your kicker, Matt Gay. He had 1 PAT made, 2 field goals made from 20 to 29 yards, and 1 40 to 49 yards, and 1 50 plus. He had 15 points at the end of that week. And your number one defense is Chicago Bears, of course. They had such a great game. I remember watching the first quarter. They had a pick 6 and within the first drive. That ruined my fantasy game that week. They had 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 touchdown. They only allowed 15 points, and they had 21 points at the end of that game. So that ended this week's perfect fantasy football lineup with 298.74 points. It was a big week for the NFL. They didn't do quite as good as the first week, but they did do better than the second week. Okay, that's everything I have for this week. Thank you for tuning in to Speaking of Sports. Make sure to listen to my podcast this week. Go to the Mute Mogul Radio Show on Facebook and like it, follow it, share it, do whatever you want with it, and give me some feedback. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer on next week's show, just comment in the link below or message me personally, and I'll try to get it answered next week's show. Other than that, thank you for listening to Speaking of Sports. I've been your host, Jared Slack. Join me next Friday at 2 p.m. Central Time on the Mute Mogul Media YouTube Network.